Dr. Richard Day, and you have found the Chiro Business Mojo podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today. And I've got a topic that I'm sure you're thrilled to talk about and hear about, and that is HIPAA compliance. Can I get a yeah? Well, I'll tell you what, this is not a favorite of mine, and I'm guessing it is not a favorite of yours. It's complicated. There's a lot of rules. It's somewhat terrifying, if you know what I mean. Am I doing it right? Am I not doing it right? What should I do? When do I do it? There's a lot that goes into HIPAA and a lot that we really don't know that goes into HIPAA. And if you can relate, if you are feeling as lost as I have been in HIPAA, then you're going to want to listen to this episode. We have some great news for you. What if there was a tool out there that wasn't a physical manual, but it was something online and you registered and it walked you through the entire process of setting up HIPAA and becoming compliant with what it is you need to know. Kind of like the way TurboTax works. If you've ever used that, it asks you questions, you answer them, and then it helps you look like you're an accountant, right? At the end, your taxes are done. Well, this is a very similar concept. So if you're struggling with HIPAA or you just want to, what can I do to be compliant? Because I really don't know. This is an episode for you. Recently, Dr. Haley sat down with Jeff Brown, and Jeff Brown is the CEO. He's the co-founder of a company called HIPAAmate. Now, he is a doctor of chiropractic, and he is dedicated to making compliance comfortable. His career spans private practice, compliance consulting, and software product management for 3 healthcare technology companies. HIPAAmate is the company that he co-founded, and it's the one that's going to be the focus of the episode today. So enjoy.
Okay. Hi, Jeff. How are you doing today? Thanks for joining us.
Very well. Well, thank you.
Good. I'm really excited. I've kind of run through HIPAAmate, and I'm very comfortable with it and seeing how it works. And so I'm excited to share that with our audience today. So can you
Wonderful.
Tell me a little bit about HIPAAmate and how it came about?
Sure, absolutely. So I am, if your chiropractors or if your listeners know or not, I am a chiropractor. I practiced for 4 years. I graduated in end of 2013, graduated, went into practice in 2004. Which was, if your people remember back then, that was kind of the beginning of the HIPAA security rule. So I needed to be HIPAA compliant. So what did I do? I did what so many chiropractors did, and I went and borrowed a HIPAA policy manual from a colleague, put my name and address on it, and called it my own. I practiced 4 years. Then I actually kind of hit a different path in life, and I ended up working as in the software industry, doing some consulting for an electronic health record company, traveling all over the country, visiting doctors' offices, helping them streamline their coding and documentation and use of the software. That turned into software product management, where I would basically improve the software, make it more user friendly, and at that point in time, it was all about this whole EHR stimulus. If everyone remembers the meaningful use days, my role turned into making the software meet meaningful use requirements. I actually fell in love with it. And so after 4 years of that company, I went and took a job as the director of product management for a telehealth company here in Columbus, Ohio. And trust me, I'm getting to the point. I did that for 2 years. And I'm a chiropractor. Here I am, a chiropractor. I'm in a telemedicine company, and it just didn't quite jive. Basically what I've discovered is that the role of telemedicine is just a more efficient way of prescribing medications. So that didn't sit well with me. But I still loved working with software, but I needed to kind of jump back into practice. So that's what I did. I dusted off my chiropractic license. Got all my CEs back, and I opened up a practice. And here I am now. It was 6-7 years later, and I needed to be HIPAA compliant because I'm back in practice. And I was actually surprised to discover that after all that time, so from 2008 to 2015, HIPAA compliance in our industry, actually in all the industries, was still being done the same way. People went to seminars, they bought manuals and CDs, they might have hired consultants, and at the end of the day, that really didn't help people because they were just as confused as ever. They really weren't any more compliant, and it's like the frustration was still existed in the industry. So here I am. I'm coming from software background. I've been working on applications to make basically software do certain things to make complex tasks easy. I knew HIPAA compliance by this point. I knew what needed to be done. I knew software. And so almost immediately after starting practice, I started working on HIPAA compliance in nights and weekends, like dissecting the rules, because I knew I wanted to build software. So I ended up partnering with the vice president of engineering at the previous company I was at, and I pitched my idea to him. I said, Matt, I think there's this market for this thing called HIPAA compliance. Doctors still hate it. They're still frustrated with it. They don't understand it. It really isn't that difficult if we can make a tool that will walk a user through. So for about a year and a half, I built HIPAAmate. And with the whole intent of making compliance easy for offices. I wanted it for myself, of course, but I wanted it for everybody. And so in, when was it? February of 2018, we launched HIPAAmate, and that same month I left practice. I love this, as you're probably going to find out by me talking about it. But I absolutely felt, I love software. I love chiropractic, but I actually found out that I love software even more. And creating something that can help doctors reduce the stress and fear of HIPAA compliance. If I can create a tool that saves the doctor's time, their staff time, something that you can check off the HIPAA compliance box and get back to what you need to do, which is to see patients, run a business, generate revenue, and all that fun stuff. That's a win in my book. So I've been at this now full time for over a year.
When you and I first were on the phone, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 months ago, and you walked through it, I could tell you were really excited about it. And the more you showed me of it, I got excited about it because it is so easy to walk through each of the steps and cover all of your bases. You've been working with a lot of chiropractors now probably with this. What do you think some of the biggest mistakes they're making are with the HIPAA compliance that aren't using HIPAAmate?
Yeah. So in my long history that I gave you, when I first was working for that initial software company, I did consulting and I traveled all over the country. Now I wasn't doing specifically HIPAA compliance, but when I was in their offices, part of the sort of the coaching that we delivered was compliance in general, more so from a coding, like an insurance coding and documentation standpoint. But then when the meaningful use stuff came out with EHRs, it transitioned into also adding in the HIPAA. So I've been in, well over 100 offices, and by and large, almost everybody, the mistakes that they're making are the same mistakes I made when I was in practice the first time. And that is that we all know there's this thing called HIPAA. It's the law. We have to do it. What exactly do you need to do is where it gets really confusing. And most of us, when we go to a seminar, we try to learn what we need to do. We kind of stop at the easiest things, which is, I need a policy manual. so we get a policy manual somehow, whether we buy it or borrow it. And we throw our name on it and we stick it on a shelf. And then there's this false sense of, okay, I have a policy manual, so therefore I'm compliant. Well, unfortunately, that's actually a really small part of compliance. And actually having a policy, you need to review that thing every year, which most doctors don't do. And so that's really the biggest mistake, is that you have a policy and then you're mistakenly thinking that you're compliant just by having a policy, yet there's all kinds of other stuff that you need to do. And by the way, I do want to mention that this is not something that is specific to, or a problem that's specific to the chiropractic industry. All healthcare disciplines, if we talk about the small healthcare market, so meaning chiropractors, dentists, family MDs, physical therapists, mental health counselors, run the gamut, right? All of them are in the same boat. We are not alone here. Everybody has the same problem, which is it's confusing. I don't know what to do. And if I try to figure it out, I spend way too much time. So therefore, I just don't do anything again. And I rely on my manual to save me. And so we're not alone. But that's the biggest issue, I think, is that when people think that they're compliant and they're really not. I believe most of us now, we know that there's probably more to it than a policy manual. I think most doctors do understand that. But again, every time they go to look for what that is, they get overwhelmed. And so they just backtrack and they say, I'm just going to hope it's the policy.
Well, there's so many pieces to practice. Yeah, and there's so many pieces to practice that it's hard to nail every one, 100%. But I think HIPAAmate helps with that, with the HIPAA, and it's an easy walkthrough process. Do you want to talk about HIPAA?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the, again, I was like everybody else in that I felt from what I read and just the feelings that I had talking with colleagues and just my understanding, this was several years ago, of HIPAA, is that it was this big, huge, hairy beast that is really hard to wrangle in and to actually fit into your practice. Really, the correct term would be to implement into your practice. That's the hardest part of compliance, is the implementation. I'll go to seminars. We can send our staff. We can sit there and listen to me for 4 hours, talk about all the things you have to do for HIPAA. But at the end of the day, the hardest part is coming back to your office and actually implementing HIPAA compliance. We can learn about it all you want. You can figure it all out, but its implementation is the key. I was in the same impression, same boat, that it was this huge, big beast. Well, it wasn't until I put on my software hat and started to dissect all of the puzzle pieces and all the requirements and see how they fit together, how they interconnect. And there's a ton of interconnections, which is why just buying a manual does not work, because you can't leverage all these interconnections. But when I started to put all this stuff together into HIPAAmate, which I know you are aware of and you've seen, it actually is not a very difficult process when you have something else, some other tool that walks you through what to do. And as you know, Doc, with HIPAAmate, I don't educate people on what they need to do with HIPAA. I just have them do it. I don't want people to be HIPAA experts. What I want them to be is just be compliant. That's it. You don't have to know why you're doing certain things. You just need to know that you're doing them, so that if anybody questions your integrity as to whether or not you're protecting patient information, you have proof. Yes, here's all the things that I'm doing, A, B, C, X, Y, Z. You may not know exactly why you're doing them, but that doesn't matter. That's my job. I need to know why people need to do what they need to do, and I build that in the software, and then I let the software just work through those processes with customers. But it's bringing this huge complex thing and removing all of the uncertainty, removing all of the I don't know what to do, or I have to figure this out, because you don't need to. I wanted to put all that into a tool that somebody could use. And then we just take away that entire burden of the figuring it out on your own. That doesn't need to happen. So that's why I built HIPAAmate. That's what it's supposed to do. That's what it does. It takes away that anxiety that you're missing something. And don't get me wrong, we still have things we need to build into HIPAAmate. We certainly do. We've only been around for a year. HIPAA is big. I've hit all the major pieces, but we still have things that we want to add to just even make it even better. Yes.
And I think you even take it another step further, making it easier, and that you have built in that, like, it's okay to say no to this question. Don't feel like you need to know the answer to this, or you have like information there that helps even get through the questions. So, which is nice. And then you guys are always available also as well, right? With the, like a customer service to help walk through it. Okay.
Yes. Our goal, our mission, our vision, it's kind of all the same thing for me. I just have one, and that is, it's simple. It's make compliance comfortable. That is my entire goal in life. Notice I didn't say HIPAA compliance, because we do want to expand into other areas of compliance. For example, OIG compliance. A lot of chiropractors have concerns of that. In the dental industry, they all want OSHA compliance, so we are going to add some things later. But it's to make compliance comfortable. The only way I can do that is to, or the best way I can do that is to A, create something that just, walks you through everything. But it's B, it's when you get to those questions in HIPAAmate and it says, do you encrypt, or do you do, here's a good example. Do you perform background checks on your employees? And what's underneath there? Like you said, it's a note. It's a note from me telling you, Doc, it's okay. It's okay to answer no to this question. Just because I'm asking it doesn't mean you have to say yes. Background checks are not a HIPAA requirement. Remember, it's my job to know what information to ask you and what to do with that information. So I don't need you, I don't only ask you things that are actual requirements. I ask you all the required questions, but everything's a requirement. I need to know that. So if I say it's okay to answer no, and that gives you a little bit of a sense of comfort, right? Remember comfort? I'm trying to make compliance comfortable. I want you to know, I'm worried that I'm answering no to this question, but here's Jeff telling me it's okay to answer no. So he must know what he's doing. And then yes, later on in risk management, we may address that. If you answered no, but it's required, we'll work through that. If it's not required, we'll work through that too. But that's my goal. And then, of course, support always. I tell customers all the time that it does nobody any good when you're in HIPAAmate and you're stuck and you don't know what to do. Because that makes us look bad. You feel bad. You're not comfortable anymore, right? You feel uncertain. So we do have free support. People can call or shoot a message via the app. And I get back to them, through email, actually pretty quick. But I don't ever want you to feel like you don't know what to do. That's the whole point of this thing.
And then once you kind of go through that first time, then it sends you the reminders, to update this or go through this again. Right?
Yes, we are.
Quarterly reviews and then.
So no, not yet. So as of right now, the only thing HIPAA, within the guidance that comes from Health and Human Services. Okay, so we'll back up a second. We have HIPAA is the law, right? 1986 or 19. When it started, it was way back with the privacy rule back in 96. Then it became the security rule. It got way more complex, which is what we cover most of in HIPAAmate. So that's the law. It's a very general, broad strokes. Things that you have to do. So then we have to go to HHS. HHS's job is to implement the law and to provide guidance to us. So any answers you are looking for or information you want, well, hopefully you don't have to go look for anything because we know it all. But if you ever were to question something that I'm doing, you want to go to HHS because that is sort of they're the end all be all guidance to us and how we implement the law. And that's what I use. That's how everything is based upon HHS. Based upon the guidance coming from HHS, HIPAA, most of the things, if they mention any time frames as to things that you have to do, it's annually. Now, HIPAA, in general, HIPAA compliance is considered ongoing. It's not something where you do it once and then you're good to go. It doesn't work like that. It is an ongoing activity. But that doesn't mean that you have to do like a risk analysis every month or do training every month. Those things where there's any timing involved, where they specifically call that out, it's on an annual basis. So within HIPAAmate, for example, approving your policies. When you're a new customer, you go through each of the 20, to create your HIPAA policy manual. You go through those, you approve each one, and then it's not for another year that you need to go back in and approve them. And of course, it's super quick the second time if nothing's changed. If you haven't moved locations, if you haven't, changed, electronic health records or something in that time, then you just hit approve and you move on. Same thing with training, HIPAA staff training. You want to do once a year. That's included within the product. So we have a little countdown. So once you approve today, then it says 364 days remaining. And then it counts down every day until you need to do it again. Now, being a year old, we have our first customers that are on that annual basis. Currently, the software does not actually send automatic reminders, but that is something absolutely that we are going to build in. Remember, my whole thing is I really want to make it to take that compliant, any sort of HIPAA compliance thinking. I'm going to take it off of the staff and off the doctor and put it onto us, meaning I know what information you have. Good software should be able to analyze that data on a periodic basis and, say, hey, if we know this customer, it's, they're within 30 days of needing to do training again, then let's send out an automatic alert to the privacy officer that says, hey, guess what? You have training this due or will be due soon. For right now, it's all on our dashboard where you can see how many days left you have to do something again. But we don't have automatic reminders, but that will be there. Absolutely. Then there are certain times where quarterly. Now, again, HIPAA does not anywhere say that you have to do anything on a quarterly basis, monthly basis, anything. It's all annual. Okay. However, remember, HIPAA is ongoing. So we are going to add quarterly updates as far as maybe like an additional training, something interesting about ransomware or something like that. Or if you hire somebody, you want to jump back into HIPAA and add that employee into the system. Or if somebody leaves the office, you want to go in and remove that person because there are certain questions that we ask after somebody's gone. Or maybe you buy a new computer or you swap EHRs. There's all these things that you might do during the course of a year that you'll want to jump in and update the software so that all the records are updated and everything else.
So, and it's Health and Human Services, or HHS, that monitors the HIPAA compliance? Are they the ones that come to the office?
Actually, nope, they don't. Nope. Okay. So you have HIPAA is the law. So HIPAA is the law. HHS implements the law, meaning they provide all the guidance on how we are supposed to implement it. And then the OCR, so the Office of Civil Rights, they are the ones who audit. They're the HIPAA police. So they're tasked with auditing HIPAA. They're going to be the ones who do, investigations. They're going to be the ones who do like penalties if there happens to be penalties, et cetera. That's their job. But let's be honest, that does not happen very often at all. Audits rarely happen. Random audits don't happen. They did a few years ago when they did these things. They were called, they did this audit. It was back in 2016 and 17. They were called phase 2 audits, but they were just checking. Now, this is an interesting little fact, and it's also a reason why I spent a lot of time with HIPAAmate, was in 2016 and 17, the OCR did an audit, and they found 0% of covered entities. So that's us. We're considered a covered entity. 0% actually did the HIPAA risk analysis correctly. 0%. So doctors who are listening, you're not alone. I know you probably have no idea what you're really supposed to do with the risk analysis. Most people don't. And the risk analysis, by the way, is just one piece of HIPAA compliance. Within HIPAAmate, you know that, of course, we do it as the last piece, but it is only one piece. But 0% did it right. 0%. Only 14% mostly did it correctly. And then so 86% did minimal or nothing, barely anything, or showed no attempt at all to do anything. So that was a couple of years ago. So now the government knows that, doctors are struggling with this thing. And I was like most physicians, I thought, well, of course they're struggling with it. It's super hard. And it wasn't until I actually realized it's really not that hard, but you just need the right tool. It really isn't that difficult. And I think that you're going to see over the coming years that HIPAA compliance, I don't know if it'll ever just be audited like on a regular basis, like, well, we're going to always audit 10% of, like Medicare audits. If it were true, if they audited HIPAA, then, oh my gosh, it would be in a huge market for us, but I don't think they will. But if, the government knows it's a struggle. Software is the only way to solve this thing. Doing paper, pencil, spreadsheet kind of thing absolutely does not work, because remember, it's the implementation is the problem. You cannot do this thing with a spreadsheet. And if we could do a whole nother podcast on just the risk analysis alone. But it can be done. We do know that it's, again, the industry as a whole struggles. And so while they don't do random audits, that could potentially happen because they know it's such a struggle, but I don't think that they will. They really only are going to look at your office, the OCR that is, if a patient complains about something, and that happens, unfortunately, patients just whatever, they don't like your bill or something like that, and so then they try to get at you by, whatever. They can accuse you of something, and so that might open the door for someone to come poking around. But more likely, it's actually your state that there's going to be an issue, because you have HIPAA compliance, which is federal, but you also have all of your states all have their own patient sort of confidentiality and privacy stuff. And now all 50 states now have a digital privacy sort of laws. And, if you're the gold standard is HIPAA, so meet HIPAA and you're good to go. But chances are it's really the state that's more of an issue potentially for somebody.
So does HIPAAmate, is there anything printable, or it's just all online?
So we do. Done? Yeah, the risk analysis. So if you were ever to be audited, the first thing that an auditor is going to ask you for is your risk analysis, and they're probably going to ask for your most recent risk analysis, but they may ask for more than one, or however many you have. But you need to just show that you have them. So that is something that every time a risk analysis is done, we save it. It's kind of in this reports section, and if you do 30 of them, then there's 30 of them there, and those can be printed off because we know that those are more likely to be. You're going to be asked for one of those. The other thing that they're going to want to see are training records. So HIPAA staff training, annual staff training, is a very important thing. Good news, docs, it doesn't take that long, and it's free. I mean, it's part of the software. You don't need to pay for training, and don't pay for training, because if you are paying for HIPAA training, then that means it's not compliant. And here's what I mean by that. Because when I looked at all of this guidance coming from HHS, one of the things that is extremely clear is that your HIPAA staff training needs to be over your office's policies and procedures, not your entire manual. You don't hand your staff your manual and say, read this and tell me when you're done, because it'll take them a while and they'll fall asleep. But it's over certain topics. But those topics are things that are custom to your office. And if you pay $25 for each of your staff to watch some video series and you get a fancy certificate at the end, you just watched generic training. Which some of the HIPAA training it can be generic, but then the other ones, which I definitely call out, are the ones that must be specific to your office. For example, password management training. So HIPAA calls out that you need to do password management training for your staff on an annual basis. Well, you can't just say, "Oh, use a strong password." That's what a video would tell you. You actually have to have your password management policy, which, of course, is you manage within the software, but for example, one office might say, "Oh, we require passwords to be at least 8 characters long." The next office might say, "Oh, we require 10." The next one might say 16. So it's very specific to your office. So you can't just say use a strong password. You have to literally tell your staff exactly what your policy is. It's very easy to do, but so the staff training, you want to make sure that it's custom to your office, which it is. So again, don't waste your money, please, because it's not compliant. Even though you get a certificate, that doesn't mean anything if somebody actually wanted to kind of hold you to the letter of the law. So we're going to keep a record of your training, all the past training that you've had, because that's going to be the other thing they're going to ask for. And then usually, if you're ever audited, they're also going to ask to see your policies, because your policies and procedures, that is considered sort of it's kind of the framework for everything else within your office. And so they want to see that. And what are they looking for? A, that you have one. B, when was the last time you actually reviewed it? Remember, it's annual, and software is awesome with this because obviously you hit approve, we date timestamp it, we know it's the privacy officer that did it. So there's always a record of all of the approval dates. And of course, if you change anything, we always keep a record of the old one and what the changes were. But that's where documentation matters. Right now, not everything needs to be printed out. Most things, like your training, you don't need to print that out. Or the training record. That's just something that, you need to be able to demonstrate that it's there. We are going to add printing to everything, though. But right now, only certain things you can print off. But we are going to where everything is printable. But that's kind of it's not super important. I know that people don't get audited very often, so I'm not worried about it. Okay. But obviously, you can still print from the browser if you need to.
Yeah. So, are there any big changes coming up with HIPAA compliance, or?
No, this is the beauty of HIPAA, is it rarely changes, which is good for all of us. It's good for me. It's good for you. The last time HIPAA had any major change was several years ago. It was back in 2012 and 13 with the omnibus rule. HIPAA changes maybe twice every 10 years. Is there anything that's significant? Now, what does change more often? Remember, so HIPAA is this big law. To actually change the law, it is a big deal. And that's why it only changes once or twice every 10 years. It's a huge deal, act. It takes an act of Congress to change it. But what changes, though, is the guidance coming out from HHS. Remember, HIPAA is very broad. It's very sort of generalized. If you actually read the law itself, you're going to go what in the world am I supposed to do? And that's why you don't read the law, read what HHS says. So HHS will have new guidance that comes out, or maybe reinterpretations of things or expansions on things. And so that's what I keep up on to make sure that, if there's anything that's significant that I need to change in the software or add or things like that, then I keep up on that. There is actually currently the HIPAA law may change. However, it's in an area that really it's not going to affect us. It has to do more with patient portal kind of stuff. And not patient portals. Scratch that. It has more to do with the exchange of information between doctors. But from our perspective, it has more to do with like big, huge health systems. Let's put it that way. But once that new rule comes out, if it gets enacted, then of course I read it. I'm on all these cybersecurity law, like news things. And so that's where I get all the info. But that's how we, make sure that we're still good. And what we're, the guidance that we provide is still valid.
When do you think someone should implement a HIPAA program in their office? Do they need it day one? Someone graduates, they get their license, they open their practice, they need something.
Yes. So they do. I mean, again, it is the law. Now, this is kind of funny because, it's the law, but let's face it, if you're like, I live in the state of Ohio, so if the speed limit on highways is 70 miles an hour, but there's no cops, people are going to drive 40, 80, 100. They're not going to follow the law. And that's kind of the problem with HIPAA compliance is that it's the law, but there really aren't any cops unless somebody complains about you speeding, then they might look at you. But so a lot of us just don't really, we haven't done it for years. We're kind of know that we're supposed to, but, we're going to take the risk. It makes that was a good argument, last year. 2 years ago, 5 years ago, because again, you have to look at your cost benefit ratio, and the cost of HIPAA compliance for any office was it cost a lot. It cost a ton of time if you tried to do it on their own. And if you went out to a consulting service, it cost a ton of money. So therefore startups, new businesses, or even doctors who have been in business for a while, it was always a cost-benefit ratio, and they said, you know what, the cost is too great. I'm going to assume the risk of not being compliant. That was sort of the decision. But now, the reason I'm doing this is to solve that problem. I don't want you to have to make a decision between following the law or, like meeting your business, your bills at the end of the month, right? I'm like, no, we can make this affordable. We can make it easy. Because that shouldn't be a choice. You shouldn't have to make that choice. You should just know, I can follow the law. It's not that difficult. It's easy to do. It's not going to take me a ton of time. And I can move on with running my business. So you should do it from day one.
It's easier to implement it day one. It's good information to know. It's a good process to start and to implement some of the systems involved that you need to figure out, the policy and procedures of your practice, that kind of thing. I think it is good to implement day one. You have all the time. Well, you should have more time most people have more time day one than others. Some people have families and other, a lot of other things going on. But I think if you have the opportunity, for sure, especially with HIPAAmate, it's so easy. And
so we have a new business. A dentist just signed up with us. This was about 2 weeks ago. She called me up. She goes, I'm starting a business. And, she heard about me through somebody on some Facebook group or something. And she asked me, so she's doing all of her startup stuff. And now the dental industry has way bigger expenses for starting a business than we do. Just their equipment alone is just a lot more. But she goes, should I start this now? And I said, well, absolutely, because right now you have 3 weeks before she's opening. I go, right now she should have done this about 2 months ago, but because you can get through this as a new practice. It'll be a piece of cake. It'll take you like 2 hours to go through the whole thing. But also you're setting the stage for, all my new computers that I have, before you even have any patient data on them, she can go in and make sure, like all of her the automatic log offs are on the computer. They have antivirus installed. If she chooses to do encryption, she'll know what that means. And if she wants to do it or not, that's not a HIPAA requirement. It's recommended, but not required. So she can kind of have all of her ducks in a row and be done, check off the HIPAA compliance box so that on day one of her practice, because I told her, I said, really, in your first month, 2-3 months, do you want to worry about compliance or do you want to do 100% new patient acquisition? She goes, of course, I want to build a practice. I'm like, exactly. Yeah. But just get it now and get it done. And so she did. So, of course, it always makes sense just to get it, again, check it off, right? And then you don't have to worry about it. And then it's only, again, you change things as you need to later.
And you're aware of the process of when you start a relationship with another business and they need to sign, what's that agreement?
That's actually a good point, because as a new business, all of your relationships are new, and you have to find out, hey, I have a relationship with a new business. Are they a HIPAA business associate, or are they just somebody that, that I don't need to get a business associate contract? So that's the thing. It's actually a great point, because you can think about those things ahead of time instead of after the fact, which is where, doctors who are already in practice, that's the thing. It's like, oh, wait a second. I use an online scheduling service. I didn't know I needed a business associate agreement with them. Yes, you do. And how long have you? Well, I've been using them for a year. Okay. So, that's a problem. But you just, I always tell people, like, what do I do about the time that I've done in the past where I haven't been compliant? It's like, you can't do anything about that. Just start from now and go forward. HIPAA, just like any government program. Again, I used to teach coding documentation. I dealt with Medicare audits and insurance audits. But the feds, their biggest thing is they are not out to stop you from practicing like people think. Like, oh my gosh, HIPAA is just this big pain in the butt and I can't even practice with it. No, you absolutely can. They are all about all they want to do is know that, are you making a reasonable effort to safeguard your patient information? That is what HIPAA compliance is. And when you actually look at all the questions that are asked and the things you have to do, you're like, oh, when you look at it, you're like, well, this isn't unreasonable. Of course this is reasonable. And all they want to know is, are you making the effort, like a good faith effort or a reasonable effort to do the right thing? And part of that, or I should say the way that you prove that, is that that you're in compliance. But what does that mean? That means that you have all of the documentation that you're doing, A, B, C, X, Y, Z, meaning you're meeting these requirements, because that's the proof that you're making a good faith effort to do the right thing. And that's why, like, all of those questions that we ask when you're like entering your laptop that you use in your treatment room, there's lots of questions we ask. Now, I'm doing it for security stuff and also for your risk analysis, but it's awesome, because if someone ever asks you, well, show me what you're doing for that laptop, how do you protect it? Oh, it's right here. Here's my entire list of all the stuff that I do. Oh, wow. You're doing way more than any other doctor does. Exactly. It's just about doing the right thing. And it's not that difficult. Again, my biggest challenge is trying to turn this huge, massive boat in the profession where HIPAA is this again, like this massive sort of problem. We all see HIPAA as a problem, and it is until you have a solution. But it's this big problem, and it's going in one direction, and the whole profession keeps perpetuating it in this one direction to hate it. And I'm trying to turn this ship, into the fact that no, we can turn it into something that's very lightweight and speedy, and it's a little speedboat. In fact, it's a little ski boat on a little lake. It's not that big of a deal. So that's one of my challenges, is trying to sort of de-escalate the fear that's out there, and sort of put it into a different mindset that it is certainly attainable. It's extremely attainable. And it's just that you haven't been exposed to it in the way that you can be, through software.
Awesome. It's a great solution. I enjoyed walking through it and seeing all of the pieces of it and how it works together and how smooth it works together. So I'm going to move on a little bit. I think, unless there's anything else you want to add about HIPAAmate or HIPAA compliance.
No, other than please don't fear it. Don't listen to the naysayers out there. It's not hard, and it's not something to be scared of, and you're not going to be fined $150,000. That just doesn't happen. It just doesn't. Please don't listen to that stuff. Don't do HIPAA compliance because you want to avoid a huge penalty. That's the wrong reason to do it, because if that's why you're doing it, then you're gonna pay way too much money to get it done. Do HIPAA compliance because it's something that you actually can do. It's what the law is, and it's actually quite simple to do. And you want to protect your patient data. That's it. Just like all of us do. If I go to the hospital or something like that, or go anywhere. If I go anywhere, of course I want my patient or my data protected. In fact, we expect that. So do it for that reason. And it's a practice reputation saver. Again, don't do it to try to save yourself some huge fine, because then someone's going to convince you need to pay $5,000 to save yourself $150,000. It doesn't work like that. Do it because it's good for your patients and it's good for your practice reputation. And the reason I say that is because if there is a breach for some reason, like you have a data breach, that's not good for your reputation, because you have to report that breach. If it's a big enough breach, you have to then, like, the media has to know. That's not good for any business. So just do the right thing so you don't even have a breach. and that's why you do HIPAA. And so that you can just sleep well at night. And that's kind of what my big point is, to de-escalate all the fear. And when people realize it is extremely attainable quickly and easily, then all of a sudden it won't be scary. And it's something that you have to do. I mean, yeah, you got to pay your taxes every year, but it's not a huge problem. I mean, we all just do it. Of course, this isn't as hard as taxes.
And if you have staff, you want them to take it seriously too and respect the patients coming in and that information.
Yep. Staffs or your staff is the largest, according to the data that's out there. Most data breaches are going to occur because of staff, and it's usually not malicious. It's not like you have a staff person that is attempting to do something bad. It's more mistakes. And believe it or not, a little bit of staff training can go a huge way, or it just goes a long way. Training your staff on what phishing emails look like. That's one of the biggest culprits. Is we all get spam emails, and it's when you don't quite know how to identify a BS email, and you click on a link, and all of a sudden there's a problem. So that's part of the training, right? HIPAA staff training is once a year. You have to do phishing emails. It's just, how do you identify them? What do they look like? And it's good to remind your staff about these things. And if you can prevent a problem, then guess what? You don't have a problem to deal with, which usually costs time and money.
So let's turn the boat around and talk about some other things. Who are some of your heroes or hero?
So, okay, I'm gonna say this, and I'll probably get chuckles. Actually, most people probably don't know what I'm going to talk about. But on the coffee mug I have in front of me, and the sticker on my laptop, and a T-shirt that I have have a cartoon hero, and it's Captain Caveman. Are you familiar with Captain Caveman?
Yeah.
This is from like the early 80s. So I love Captain Caveman because, and maybe you can get this from my personality, but it's a hero because I tend to just jump at everything. I jump at something or a problem or whatever with everything that I have. Whether I have all of my, whether the process is well thought out, it usually isn't. I just go after it, and that's kind of like Captain Caveman. He goes after trying to solve something without really thinking about it first. Half the time he makes mistakes and gets stuff wrong, but at the end of the day, he's working really hard to just do the right thing. And wins. But that's kind of my mentality. And it has been with this HIPAA compliance thing. I've jumped at it with both feet. I started into this, not the proper way, meaning, you have to do all this market research and all this market fit, for startups. That's what you have to do with technology companies. I didn't do that. I was like, I know it's a problem. We're building it. And it was just jump in head first, make a lot of mistakes. But at the end of the day, I'm doing this for the right reason. And that's my hero, Captain Caveman. Plus he can store all kinds of cool stuff in his hair.
I really like that. When I talk to the students at Cleveland Chiropractic, the university here, I tell them to make mistakes. You have to make mistakes to learn and to move forward and to grow. And if you're not making mistakes, you're doing it wrong. So I think that a lot of people want to be perfect, and there's this need for perfection, and it just doesn't happen. Things are not going to be perfect. You have to launch, you have to go, and you fix things as you move forward. So I really like that.
Yep. You try to fail fast. That's one of the in software startup world. It's all about failing fast. It's okay to fail. In fact, it is how you learn. But you need to recognize that failure quickly and make the adjustment that's necessary. And that's okay. Totally okay. And that's not just for software. That's when I was in practice. I started practice 2 times, right? First in 2004 and then again in 2015. And I don't know if I learned any lessons from the first time. It's been too long, but it was a fail fast. And that's okay. That's how you learn and you correct, you adjust, you pivot, as they say.
That's great. Do you have any daily rituals, habits, or affirmations that you do every day?
Oh boy,
Coffee.
I probably do. Yes, it's coffee for sure. So I work out of the house. I actually love this. It's good and bad. The bad is I go right from bed and I walk down the stairs and I get coffee in my Captain Caveman mug and I sit down and I start working. So that's bad because, of course, when I was a chiropractor, I'm on my feet all day. Now, that got tiring too. And then you want that time to sit, but now I sit way too much. So I do, just one of my habits is I try to get outside. I get up off my computer. I walk the block, walk around the neighborhood. I try to do the best, just to get the blood pumping. And it's good to do that at least once an hour, but I don't oftentimes get that. But and it's really, yes, go ahead.
I think that's good. I work from home mostly too. And in our last house, we had two flights of stairs, and I would go up and down them as many times as I could during the day.
Yeah. When I worked at the telehealth company, my colleagues thought I was kind of crazy because we were on the 4th floor. It was a 4-story building, 4th floor. And there was restrooms on every floor. And I'd leave my desk, I'd go down the flight of stairs, across the building on the 1st floor, up the flight of stairs to go to the bathroom on the 4th floor. And then when I was done, I'd go down to the 1st floor and then walk back up to the 4th floor. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, are you kidding me? This is how, why wouldn't I do this?
Yeah, I think you have to take a break to relook at things, to refocus, to acknowledge kind of where you're at, what you're doing, that kind of thing. So I think even in practice, you try to do that, have a, break here and there.
Yeah, and I think everybody has their, when you're trying to solve a problem, and this is going to come up when you're, whatever it is, whether it's a case that you have with a patient, or maybe it's a marketing kind of thing you're trying to figure out, or what went wrong with this new patient that I had, why didn't they show up? One of the things, for me, it's all software related stuff. When I have an issue that I'm trying to figure out, how do I make it the best use possible, for the customer? For me, and then this is probably going to be different for everybody, but for me, it's out running. I don't run much, nearly as much as I should. But I've discovered, for me, I do my best thinking, and some of the features that you see in HIPAAmate, believe it or not, those were dreamed up or thought up when I'm running. Because I go out there and it's a way for me to, I don't know, it's just this weird connection between sort of my brain can get totally involved in a particular scenario. But if I'm running, it's almost like it's more efficient or something. But my best ideas come up when I'm running for solving something that I need to solve. So that's probably a habit. And I know it when I'm struggling with something, I'm like, I got to go outside and run. I don't run much. I'm not some 10 mile or anything like that. But if I get 3 miles, I'm lucky. But hopefully that's they solve my answer or my question.
Yeah. Okay. So what about a favorite book? Do you have a favorite book that you recommend to Mojo Nation?
I sadly, I don't. And here's why. And my family knows this. I am my head, and and I think most doctors anyone who's in business for themselves will get this. They'll understand this. My brain, if it's not actually 100% focused on what this business, then it's 25% focused on it. So it's very difficult for me to disconnect completely and to step into a book and read it, because while I've tried this, while I'm reading, I'm feeling guilty that I'm not working on HIPAAmate. And so therefore I don't read for fun. I read, what I'm reading is actually all the trade stuff, like the HIPAA things. But it's very difficult for me because I absolutely love what I'm doing. And so when I'm not doing that, it's taking away from what I love doing. And I'm going to tell you a little story. Hopefully I don't get choked up, but so I used to go to the seminars. I'm a student. chiropractic school. I'd go to the seminars, the practice management seminars, the coaching stuff. I did it when I was in practice. I need my CE, and I'm still going to seminars. And I would listen to these, the presenters. And they're talking about how, if this is your passion, it's like, it's not even work. It's like chiropractic is your passion. They build these huge practices. They're all into it. And I'm like, yeah, I want to be that. I want to be that. I want to be doing something that I am so passionate about that it's like my life. And you know what? It never was. When I was in, I love the philosophy of chiropractic. I love the idea of it. I enjoyed practicing as well, but it wasn't something that I like woke up in the morning and wanted to immediately get to the office. And that's what these, a lot of the coaching, people, that's what they were doing. I'm like, geez, that's just not me. I love chiropractic, but I'm not, I don't know if the right word is, like, I'm not in love with it. So when I started building this thing, I found that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I now know, and I can experience that passion that you have for something, to where you get up. And that is why I come right down here and I turn my computer on, and my brain is in it. In fact, it's in it half the night. Like sometimes I don't even sleep because I'm like thinking about this stuff. But I found that passion, and it's so enjoyable. And what's just awesome, and why it just makes it even better, is because A, I found it, but B, is that it's my passion to do this, but what I'm doing is I'm helping chiropractors. Yes, I'm helping other healthcare providers too, but what I can do day in and day out is make life easier for chiropractors. You know what that does? That makes their practice better, and I'm hoping it makes their experience with their patients better, because they don't have to worry about HIPAA and have that nagging thing. It makes their staff experience better. What kind of staff person who, I feel sorry for the poor soul that, you're in an office working and it's the staff person that gets HIPAA dumped on them. Hey, I went to a seminar. Here, they bought the $500 manual and slap it down on the office manager's desk. Here, do this. And they're going, oh my God, you mean along with everything else I have to do? Like, when do I find time? And of course, they don't do it. But I want to provide the gift to those office managers, to the staff, to the poor soul who has to do with HIPAA, because it really isn't difficult, and I want them to be a resource. But I'm like, so excited that I found something that I absolutely love to do, and in the same time is it helps the people that I love most, which are the chiropractors. And I don't know, it just doesn't get any better than that, and that's why it's so difficult for me to open up a book and read, I don't know, some murder mystery or something, because the whole time my life pulls me back to what I love doing, and it's this. I go on vacation next week down to Florida, taking my kids. My daughter's a senior in high school. We've never been on a spring break trip. So we're going down to Florida, and you bet I'm going to be bringing my computer. And it's not that I don't want to spend time with my kids, but for me, sometimes when they're still asleep, because they're teenagers, so they're in bed till like 11 o'clock in the morning. For me, what is so enjoyable and comforting is to work, because it doesn't work to me. Or it's to work with my partner. He asks me a question. He's my software engineer guy, and that's enjoyable. I love that, and it's hard for me to get away from it. That's what I like to spend my time doing.
Well, it's great that you love to spend your time doing it to help all of us who don't.
Right. Right.
Okay, so a couple more questions. What's the best business advice you ever received?
Okay, that's a good one. So when I was in chiropractic school, I had a project for probably a philosophy class, and I had to interview a chiropractor, and I chose Reggie Gold. Do you know Reggie Gold?
I don't.
He's a chiropractor. Okay, he passed away now, but
okay.
Yeah, so he was so Reggie Gold. I went to Sherman College. And it was back then. It was still Sherman College of Straight Chiropractic. Now it's just Sherman College. So I was in the the whole philosophy of straight chiropractic, that whole thing. Well, Reggie Gold is like a huge, just a very well known person in that sort of realm of the philosophy world of chiropractic. And he in the interview that I did, I remember this quote. It's just the one quote that I always just remember. He said, "When you shake a can of mixed nuts, the biggest nuts rise to the top." And he was a nut. He really was. But he was like one of the, the Jersey chiropractors, I believe, or maybe it was New York, but, huge practice, back in the day. But he was a nut. And I am not a nutty person. I may sound like it, but I'm really not. I'm quite not that. But I always try to. I see that advice as, and now that I've been in sort of the business world and in startup land and all that kind of stuff, you realize, and even chiropractic in a lot of cases, is that your chiropractors who aren't afraid to step out on a limb. They're the ones who have, meaning high risk, high reward. They tend to have like the most wildly successful practices because they're willing to do what it takes, to step out on a limb, so to speak, and to sometimes be a little bit nutty and to go against the grain and to stand out from. It's really, what it is. It's to stand out from the crowd, right? That's what you need to do in any business, but in chiropractic for sure. And so I always thought of that as, you shake a can of mixed nuts, the biggest nuts rise to the top. And so I try to, or I do, I do. I let my nutty self come out every once in a while, or to a certain degree, I want to always be the nut because that's the way you get noticed. But in HIPAA world, of course, you have to really subdue that but it's still this very serious topic, compliance. And so you try to be nutty to let people know that I am human and I'm not some stuffy like auditor or something like that. But I can't do it too much because then I don't want to like shut people out. But so that's kind of just a quote that I heard from somebody in business in chiropractic field, and it stuck with me. And I try to apply that, or I do apply that advice into everything that I do. Probably not enough when I was in practice, though. Otherwise, I would have been more successful.
I was going to say, I think that's something we talk about a lot when I go to the school. And I think it's hard for new docs because they want to treat everyone, but it's hard to connect with when you're trying to connect with everyone. Whereas if you try to connect with your ideal patient, then it's easier for them to recognize you once you've recognized who that person that you serve best is. So I really like that. So what's the best way for people to connect with you? How can we find you?
The best way is, the first best way really is online, HIPAAmate.com, HIPAAmate. A lot of people say HIPAA with two P's, HIPPA. So of course we bought both domain names. if you spell it wrong, you'll still get to our site. But HIPAAmate.com. Actually, it's changing the website tonight. It's going to look totally different. I do all the website work. I'm a little bit of a techie guy. I kind of enjoy that too. It helps calm me down, learning how to code and stuff. But so go to the website. There's going to be some new videos on there. You'll hear my voice again, much shorter, I'm sure. Or call me. My phone number's on there. I'm the only one who answers the phone right now. I'm the only guy who's full-time at HIPAAmate. My two software engineers, they're both it's like a nights and weekends thing for them. We're trying to get them full time here within about 6 months. Hopefully one of them will be full time. But so I always answer the phone. So don't think, it's not going to be me. Or send an email, contact@hipaamate.com. That comes to me too. And I love talking about this. If you have any questions, of course, just ask away because I love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.